Quantum, engineered by nature.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Quantum Botanicals. I'm Brian, and today I'm going to show you how I mix my premium blueberry soil blend using ingredients tested right here at home. This is part of my OG Berry Blend formula series, designed specifically for container growing in hot environments. Stay tuned and we'll get right to it. Here's everything I experimented with during the OG Berry soil trials, including some things I ultimately didn't use in the final formula. We'll go over what worked, what didn't, and why each component made it into version 1.1.
This is my original test setup, just the basics laid out before I finalized the formula. Version 1.0 of the OG Berry Blend used 3 parts peat moss, 6.5 parts Kellogg Shade Mix, plus bark and pumice. These 2 Vigoro planters were used to test water retention between 2 blend ratios. I tracked weight loss over time, and the 3 to 6.5 blend held moisture longer than the 2 to 4 mix. The 3 to 6.5 blend included more shade mix and a full scoop of bark, while the 2 to 4 blend was a lighter mix with only half bark and 2 parts peat moss. Both used 2.2 liters of pumice. You can feel the difference right away. OG Berry V1 has more structure, better drainage, and a balanced moisture profile. Here's a look at the final ingredients for the OG Berry version 1.1 blend. Simple but powerful. Peat moss, Kellogg Shade Mix, fine and chunky bark, and some added pumice for structure. For this batch, I'm using a basic 8-inch nursery pot as my scoop. It gives me a consistent way to measure each part. We start with peat moss. This makes up 3 parts of the total mix. It's lightweight, acidic, and helps with moisture retention, especially important for blueberries. Since this pot's a bit small, I'm splitting the load in half to keep it workable. Next up, Kellogg Shade Mix. This blend is designed for acid-loving plants, and it's OMRI listed for organic gardening. We're adding 6.5 parts total of this mix. I'll start with 3 here. It's a chunky, forest floor style mix with bark and compost, perfect for blueberry root structure. Once the base is partially mixed, you'll start to see the texture coming together. Not too dense, not too loose. I always mix by hand to feel the balance. Every handful tells you if you're on the right track. This is the foundation. Airy, acidic, and structured. Now we're ready for the structural materials. Next, I'm adding fine orchid bark. This one's from Unigrow. It's pre-washed, ready to use, and designed for epiphytic orchids. It boosts drainage and airflow, which is critical in container mixes like this one. I'm using about half a part total. Next, I'm adding 1 part of orchid bark chunks. These provide structural aeration and simulate a forest floor texture, keeping the mix breathable even in deep containers. I'm only adding about half the container at this time. The other half of the pot will be added to the overall mix later in this video. Now I'm adding back in the remaining half of my peat moss. I saved this earlier to help balance moisture after the first round of shade mix and bark wetting. We're finishing off the blend with another 3.5 parts of Kellogg Shade Mix. I use this particular blend because it's pH optimized for acid-loving plants like blueberries. Right here, I'm using my finger to mark the halfway point on the measuring pot, so this last scoop brings us to exactly 6.5 total parts. On top of that, I'm adding half a pot of the orchid bark chunks I had set aside earlier. This gets layered into the middle of the container to improve drainage and airflow in the root zone. Now I do one final hand mix, blending everything thoroughly. You want to feel for consistency. It should feel airy but not loose, moist but not sticky. Time to finish the mix with 2.2 liters of horticultural pumice. I weigh out the full bag to calculate the total, then pour in about half, aiming for just enough to add long-term structure without drying out the blend too quickly. Now that the pumice is in, I'm giving the whole blend a final mix. Since the pot is almost full, it's not the easiest setup. Next time I'll probably use a wheelbarrow or tarp for better control, but this works fine if you take your time. To make it more manageable, I split the mix between 2 pots. This also helps me make sure everything gets blended evenly, especially if you're working with chunkier materials like bark and pumice. Here's a close look at the texture. You want it to feel airy but not dry, structured but still able to retain moisture. The bark and pumice help create pockets of airflow, while the peat and shade mix hold moisture and nutrients. If it clumps loosely in your hand but still falls apart with a light touch, that's a good sign. Topping it off with the last half part of shade mix. This finishes the blend and adds a final layer of organic matter for even moisture retention. Next morning, you can really see the structure under daylight. The top is still soft and the mix has held its shape and moisture overnight. That's exactly what we're aiming for.
Alright, now that our soil is fully blended and consistent with the peat moss, Kellogg shade mix, bark, and pumice all mixed in, we're ready to move on to the next step, choosing the right container. Now it's time to choose the right pot to match the blend, and I want to walk you through exactly why I picked the one I'm using today.
For this transplant, I'm going with this 17-inch container. It has a nice clean profile and just the right depth for young blueberry roots to develop. Inside, it's slightly tapered, narrower toward the base. That shape encourages drainage, but it also means less room at the bottom for root spread, so we'll keep that in mind. Measured across, it's just under 17 inches wide at the top. Height comes in around 12 inches. Plenty of vertical room to layer bark, soil, and allow root expansion over time. Here's the product tag in case you are looking for the same one. This one came from Home Depot. Next up is the 19-inch terracotta style container. Even though it's labeled larger, the actual base is narrower than the 17-inch pot, which can restrict lower root spread. It's taller and holds more volume near the top. That taper could affect drainage and soil layering. Visually clean, but maybe not ideal for this particular blend. Last up, the tulip pot. It's a different shape, flares out toward the top, and tapers deeply. That can work well for certain herbs or ornamentals, but for blueberries, the volume near the base is a little too narrow for my blend structure. Still a good option for smaller rooted plants.
With the pot selected, we'll go ahead. With the pot selected, we'll go ahead. With the pot selected, we'll go ahead and start layering the base. With the selected pot, we'll go ahead and start layering the base. I'll show you how I prep the bottom for proper drainage and how I load in the mix without compacting it.
Now that the soil is fully blended, we're ready to prep the container for transplanting. I'll be using this 17-inch terracotta pot, not just because it looks good, but because it provides solid root depth and temperature stability in the sun.
We're starting with the base layer. I use a single, flat rock to cover the drainage hole, not to block water, but to prevent large bark chunks from falling through. Next comes the coarse bark layer. This helps raise the soil column slightly and promotes better airflow and drainage, especially in tall containers like these. I'm layering in about an inch or so of bark, not too dense, just enough to create a breathable barrier that stops compaction at the very bottom. Here's a close-up of the base. You can already see the structural benefits. Water won't pool here and oxygen exchange stays high. Here's the finished prep. Soil blend on the left, bark lined container on the right. I like to pan around and double check the edge coverage, making sure the bark is even and well placed before we start layering the mix.
Now that our drainage layer is set, we'll add a base layer of soil before placing the plant. I'm using the same OG Berry version 1.1 blend we just finished mixing.
Now we begin filling the pot with our finished OG Berry version 1.1 blend. I'm using a basic hand trowel to layer the mix gently. No packing, no force. The goal here is aeration and structure. You'll notice how light and fluffy the blend stays even as we fill. That's due to the bark and pumice keeping the mix open and breathable. I'm filling the container to about 60% for now. This gives us space for plant placement, top layering, and any minor adjustments once the root ball is in. Now I'm placing the blueberry into the pot, still in its nursery container, just to check crown height and see how the mulch layer will sit once we top it off. Getting this right is crucial. You don't want the crown too deep or sitting above the final mulch line. Give the container a few firm squeezes. This helps loosen the root ball without tearing any of the feeder roots. Here I'm loosening up the base of the root ball. Work in the corners and center to open it up a bit. You can see I'm flaring the roots outward slightly. This encourages new growth into the fresh blend instead of spiraling in place. Now I start backfilling gently with our OG berry mix, using both hand and trowel, making sure to support the base while tucking the soil in evenly around the roots. Right here I'm checking the soil level from the rim using my fingers. You'll see there's about a 1 to 2 inch gap left at the top. That's intentional. It gives us space for the mulch layer without overflowing the pot. This also helps lock in moisture and gives the crown room to breathe. I add just a little more soil to finish leveling the top. Not compacting, just padding. Almost like sealing it in with intention. Good soil, good structure, good start. Now I'm switching to our mulch layer. This is fine bark. We'll use it to cover the surface gently, right up to the rim or just slightly below. This helps retain moisture and keeps the crown safe. You can see here how I'm applying the bark evenly around the top. This also helps prevent splash up and improves surface airflow. And here's the final check. Crown placement is clean, exposed, and level with the top of the mulch. That's exactly where we want it. These are the three amendments I didn't use in this blend, but they're definitely on my radar. Dr. Earth acid levers, Worm Gold Plus, and a powdered soil acidifier. Dr. Earth is a great all-in-one slow-release mix, but I held off for this first batch to better control the baseline soil behavior. This acidifier might still be added later, especially around the outer perimeter of the pot. Just a light dusting at the surface can help maintain the pH blueberries love. Same goes for this worm casting blend. Great for biological activity, but I want to monitor soil structure and water retention first. I'll be making future videos showing exactly how I monitor and control soil pH, track moisture levels, and determine the right time to add nutrients after transplanting, so stay tuned for that. Shade is critical for the first few weeks after transplanting to avoid stress or leaf burn, and I always try to keep new plants close to my main watering zone to make daily care as easy and consistent as possible. Once the pot's fully set up, I like to slide it onto a hand dolly and carefully roll it over to a shaded area, usually right here under the patio where it's protected from direct sun during the hottest part of the day. Now for the first deep watering. I'm using just a half gallon here, marked on the side of the container, and I pour it slowly around the center and base, making sure the root zone gets fully saturated without flooding the top layer. After watering, I like to gently pat the fine bark to check for surface moisture and then peel it back a bit with my fingers to feel how well the top layer of soil is holding water underneath. Everything feels right. Blend looks balanced, moisture is spot on, so I go ahead and seal it back up. With that, this blueberry transplant is done and ready to grow. Let's see how it performs over the next few weeks.